Welcome to the all-in-one installation guide for your tilt screen modification. You'll notice there are chapters in the video scrubber for you to conveniently skip to your MPC model. Before you do, it's important to watch through the next 4 minutes to understand procedures that are universally shared between each model. A relatively small Phillips or flathead screwdriver, 4mm and 5mm hex keys, a thin flat prying tool to help with releasing ribbon cables from their connector, and finally, a pair of tweezers, just in case you need to reach for fallen screws. The enclosure, a set of 15mm M3 bolts including nuts and washers, and finally the extension board and ribbon cable. Place both nuts in their designated slot. These are the mounting points for securing the enclosure to the MPC. You'll notice I'm applying quite a bit of force because of their tight fit. When you do this, always make sure to support the opposite side of the tabs to reduce the risk of damage. In the next part, we need to understand how these ribbon cables work. These shiny little pins are the electrical contacts between the cable and the connector. The orientation of the pins determine whether a connection is made between two circuits. If you flip the polarity, you might be sending power through to circuitry not designed to receive the current. The extension board included in the kit uses bottom-facing contacts, so both the screen end and the extension end need to have their pins face down into the connector. The wider ribbon cable has fancy copper contacts, following the same principle, but this time we need the contact pins. You didn't just lose internet connection. This is future me pausing the segment to update some information. In these images, you can see the order of the pins is flipped on the ribbon cable, depending on which model you have. Pin 1 always needs to match the indicator on the connector. What this means is that for live owners, your copper contacts need to face up when inserted into the screen and face down on the main board. But if you have a 1 or 1+, you need the contacts facing down into the screen and up on the main board. This is an important distinction, so if you have doubts, check your ribbon, see where pin 1 is located and match it with the small indicator on the connector. Now back to the video. When you go to insert the screen, align it with the grooves and then slowly push it to the back. Make sure to hold down the ribbon cable so that it doesn't get pulled to the point it tears. You will know when it's inserted all the way, as it should click. Then, go around the edge and make sure it clips onto the screen. You're ready to jump to the chapter with your particular model. Enjoy this process and take your time. Let's not waste any time and get right into it. We're going to start by removing the bottom plate. There's a few different types and sizes, so it's important to keep track of where they belong. Let's flip it over to access the back panel. Here we will remove all the screws, including the rings around the audio jacks. Flip it back over and we can reveal those beautiful green insides. Let's unmount this main board by removing the 2 silver screws located in the top corners. This is the heart of your MPC, so treat this step like open heart surgery. Make sure when you lift up that you do so slowly, as all of the cables run directly into this board. Now is a good time to snap a photo so we can refer back to it when closing up. You might notice from here on that there are a few jump cuts where it looks like we skipped some steps. In the filming of the video, we had to rearrange the order of events from multiple takes. Just disregard the surroundings and focus on the action front and center. Once all the cables have been removed, we can put the heart to the side and move on to unmounting the screen. There's 5 screws that secure the screen to the body. These need to be removed. Slowly lift the MPC while supporting the screen, and you should find that it will come out without any resistance. Just double check that the cable doesn't get caught on the way out. Try not to pull this cable all the way through. It's a little finicky to feed back into the hole. It's time to connect the extension board. We wouldn't skip this out of spite, so let's do it again. If you didn't install the steel nuts into the enclosure at the beginning, you'll want to do this now, before we slide the screen into position. Let's get the wider ribbon cable inserted. This can be a little tricky. Alternatively, we could insert this cable before we insert the screen into the enclosure. Just be aware that the cable will need to be folded. We're almost done. Let's get the screen in position. Feed the cables back down into the body, make sure they don't get caught, and then align the 2 mounting tabs into the top holes on the MPC. You'll know when it's in the right spot when it drops into place. In this last step, we'll take the included bolts and washers and fasten them into the enclosure. You might notice some resistance at first, but this is completely normal. The bolts self-tap into the plastic until they reach the steel nut on the other end. You can connect the extension cable now. The contact pins need to face upwards towards us when inserted into the connector. This varies between models, but for the base MPC One, contact pins face up. We can start to reassemble the MPC. The process is the same as the teardown, just in reverse. Before you close up the bottom, you'll want to test that everything works. Turn your MPC on and confirm it's operating. If your screen shows an image but doesn't respond to touch, you'll want to make sure all the ribbons along the extension line are inserted properly. If your screen lights up but doesn't show an image, turn off your MPC immediately and check the wide ribbon cable going to the screen is inserted correctly. And there you have it. This concludes installation for the MPC One. We appreciate you coming along for this ride and hope your MPC feels like a new machine. Hello to the Live One owners. Let's get started with this installation. The first step is to remove the bottom plate. You'll want to remove all the screws and place them in an organised pile, as there's a few sizes to keep track of. If you have an SSD drive installed, it will be best for you to remove it now. If you installed your SSD, you can treat it as if you were switching it out. Doing this makes removing the bottom plate more convenient. Flip it around to access the back of the panel. Here, we can take out the remaining screws, including the rings around the audio jacks. We can pull the volume encoders off and eject the SD card while we're at it. With all the screws removed, we can slowly lift up and outward to reveal the mastery behind every MPC. As you will see, there's a grounding cable towards the back. Unplug the grounding cable and then we can put the plate to the side. Remove the SSD shield. It'll be mounted with a single silver screw. Then you will find two more silver screws holding down the I/O board. Once these are removed, we can start to disconnect the ribbon cables found on the surface. This is a good time to snap a photo so we can refer to it later when reconnecting everything. In our case, the last ribbon cable had a broken clip. For the purpose of this demonstration, we stuck it down with the tape. Now, with all the ribbons disconnected, it's time to slowly flip the board over. Just a reminder, snap a photo now so you can refer back to the cable layout later. Go through and disconnect each cable. Once that's done, we can put this board to the side. It's time to remove the screen. But to get to one of the screws, we need to unmount the battery cage. There should be 2 screws hidden just beneath the foam padding. Remove these and the cage can be put to the side temporarily. There it is. Take out this screw first, and then we can remount the battery cage. Let's disconnect the cables first. We need to get to the underside of this little PCB board. Remove the screws, flip it over, and you will see the ribbon in its connector. Next, disconnect the wired cable on the same board, followed by the honey-coloured ribbon that's connected to the back of the screen. Alright, we're almost there. You should see 4 remaining screws holding the screen. These can be removed. Make sure you support the screen on the other side and lift the MPC. The screen should come out effortlessly. Just make sure your cables are disconnected and out of the way. This step was covered in the introduction, but we'll repeat it here for you just in case. This is the extension board. Both the screen end and the extension end require the contact pins to face down into the connector. Let's insert our screen into the enclosure. You'll notice the grooves along the edges for the screen to slide into. Just make sure to hold the ribbon cable as to avoid it getting damaged. Now, connect the wide ribbon cable. Align the enclosure so that the mounting tabs drop into the holes on the MPC. Then, flip the MPC over and secure the enclosure with the 2 bolts and washers provided. There will be a bit of resistance at first because the thread is self-tapping into the plastic before it reaches the steel nut. Also, don't forget to store the original mounting screws from the screen. You only need the 2 that come in the kit. With the screen installed, all that's left to do is close everything up. Just repeat these steps in reverse, and you should be ready to smash those pads in no time. Quick tip: before you mount the bottom plate back to the MPC, test that everything is working. If your screen shows an image but doesn't respond to touch input, you'll need to check that all the connectors along the extension line are positioned correctly. If your screen turns on but shows no image, turn the MPC off immediately and check to see if the wide ribbon connected to the screen is inserted correctly. On the screen end, the copper pins need to face up towards us. On the main board, the contact pins face down into the connector. Now you can get back to making that sweet, sweet music. Glad you could make it to this guide. I won't waste any time, let's get right to it. The first step is to remove the bottom plate. To do this, we need to remove all the screws. You'll want to keep these organised as they come in different sizes for the different parts of your machine. We recommend you remove the SSD drive if you have one installed. This will give you somewhere to hold on to when we lift the plate off. Flip the MPC over so we can access the back panel. Here, we'll be removing all the screws, including the rings around the audio ports, the input volume knob, and the SD card. time to lift this plate off. Pull up and outward and place it to the side. Now that we're in, we'll start by lifting the SSD shield out. There's one screw holding it down against the main board. It's much shorter than the others, so keep note. Disconnect the ribbon cables on the top of the I/O board. Three silver screws can be removed to access the connectors on the underside. To lift the board all the way, we need to disconnect the three cables closest to us first. The left and right speakers are indicated with L and R. The length of the cables is indicative of the speaker they belong to. There's one more cable here. Disconnect this too. At this point, it's possible to lift the board 90 degrees to reach the other cables. We recommend you snap a photo now so you can refer back to the layout when closing up. Let's put the board off to the side and begin to disconnect the screen ribbon cables. You'll see there's a small circuit board with one screen cable. Disconnect that ribbon. The second ribbon is attached to the back of the screen. It's much wider. With everything disconnected, we can remove the 5 screws mounting the screen. One of the screws is just beneath the battery cage. You should be able to reach it with a relatively thin screwdriver. Before you remove all the screws, make sure to hold the screen from the other side. Slowly lift the MPC and the screen should come out effortlessly. Just make sure the ribbon doesn't get caught on the way out. Flip your MPC over and pull the wide ribbon cable through the slot. We can now move on to installing the modification. First, let's connect the extension board. This board uses bottom-facing pins. Remember, we need the contact pins on the ribbons to face downwards into the connector. With that done, it's time to slide the screen into the enclosure. Make sure when you do this that you're holding the ribbon cable down to avoid it getting caught on the bottom lip. Push the screen all the way back until there's a click, then make sure the sides are also clicked into position. You can connect the wide ribbon now. It might be a bit tricky, so alternatively we could have connected this prior to sliding the screen into the enclosure. Be aware, the ribbon will need to be folded in that instance. Position the tabs of the enclosure with the back holes on the MPC. Once inserted, it should just fall into place. Time to flip the MPC over once again. While holding our newly positioned screen, take the 2 bolts and washers that came in your kit and fasten directly into the stems. You might feel a bit of resistance at first. This is because the thread is self-tapping into the plastic until it reaches the steel nut at the end. So, you made it to the end. Now, all you have to do is complete the same steps in reverse. When you reach the point of sealing your machine up with the bottom plate, just do a quick test to make sure your MPC is all in working order. There are 2 things that might happen. In case of the screen appearing with the image but not responding to touch, you need to go back and check the extension. Somewhere along that line there's something not just right. In case of the screen turning on but showing up black, immediately power off and check that the wide ribbon cable attached to the screen is inserted correctly. That's it. We have reached the end of the guide. Now go win some Grammys and tell everyone how you couldn't have done it without your upgraded MPC.